Hello, hello. Welcome to our IlluGen live training stream. It should be a masterclass in IlluGen. Let me know if the audio and everything is okay, and we're going to dive in here very soon. Let me just make sure that everything is set up properly. It does appear so. All right, let's get started. So, IlluGen is our visual effects tool. And the primary thing that it's supposed to do is it creates assets for video games primarily. And let me see if I can hide my taskbar real quick. Let's see, taskbar behavior and hide. All right, so IlluGen is our visual effects software. And the idea is that you can create all kinds of assets. So whether it's blooming flowers, meshes for your visual effects, you've got animated textures, noises, masks, etc. The whole idea here is that we want you to be able to create pretty much any asset you need for visual effects. We're also kind of branching into things like environment textures as well. And so, like for instance, this is like a tree bark, and you can see here that you have lots and lots and lots of nodes that you can kind of put down and procedurally generate all of this stuff. And so what we're going to be going over is how do you actually use IlluGen? How do you create these assets? And then towards the end of the stream, we're going to create a little visual effect inside of Unreal, just real quick, and show you how you can start using IlluGen inside of your production workflows. And hopefully we'll be able to convert you over to IlluGen from the other tools that you're using, because I really do think that IlluGen is fantastic. So, and if anybody has any comments or anything, just feel free to ask questions and stuff in the chat, and I will try to answer them live. Happy to answer whatever I can. So we're just going to kind of work our way down this list of things that I've kind of set up as reminders for myself to make sure that we're on track with the stream. So the first thing is kind of an overview of the 4 quadrants. So let me just select this little fractal node here. So the first quadrant we have is our viewport. And within this, you've got things like, a pixel inspector. You can click it to deselect it. You've got things where you can like preview your tiling of textures. You can say whether or not you want bilinear filtering, preview it as sRGB. You've got your like padding for where your initial texture is if you're seeing things with tiling. And then we have this little toggled stripe lines where if I go to this, and let's just bring off, say, something like a levels, something like this, and then we can go to my little curve and drag this up. And so where all the exact like 255 value whites are, and then where 0 is where the stripes will be. So that kind of shows you where your absolute black and absolute white values are inside of your texture. So this is a good way to just kind of preview where those particular stripes and stuff like that are. So it's quite interesting. And so that's the gist of the viewport. And you'll notice that we have both a 2D and a 3D viewport. We have a 2D and a 3D side by side. And then we also have auto. And auto basically just says, hey, if I click a certain texture or something, or if I go down and I click a mesh, it's going to select the correct viewport for me automatically. And you can see that once you go into geometry, you have a number of other tools. So you can preview like your vertices, your normals and tangents, the point orientation, the number of the vertices. You can preview like your wireframe. You've got like your UVs. You've got geometry masks. On this one, I don't have a geometry mask. And then we also have like vertex colors. And you can preview them by color and so on and so forth. And it just goes on and on. Then the next quadrant, of course, is over here. We've got the node graph. There's a few important things where if you right click, this is going to give you your node menu. And so you can also type something. So if you're like, hey, I'm looking for a star, or I'm looking for, a tile of some sort, or a triangle or whatever, it has kind of like fuzzy search. And so it'll just kind of go through, search all of the node descriptions, node titles, etc., and then also show you a preview of all of those nodes as well. Um, at the top, we set our actual like texture resolution. So if we want a larger resolution, so say we want something that is a larger width than height or something like that, we can come in here and set that. If you want them to be the same, you can lock it. And then that's going to give us more texture resolution, basically. So you can kind of come in here and mess around. You can see that it pixelizes it once we only have 64 by 64. So going back up to 1024. That's kind of the gist of the node graph. We do have like different filtering. You can choose like a global tiling. And so you can see by default, we do have tiling on with these little icons here. And so, but if you take it off, you can say no tiling, and now everything's going to switch to no tiling. And if I try and view the tiled view, you can see it is not going to tile. And if we choose tiling, you can do that. You can also choose tiling and stuff like per node. So at the top, we have textures. You can have per node sizes as well. It does not have to respect the entire graph. And you can also say, hey, you know, I want to not tile this particular texture for whatever reason. Sometimes there's a lot of reasons you don't want to tile stuff, maybe like transforms and so on. So I think that's pretty useful for you to know. Now, I think that's pretty much it. There's some other buttons up here, like we've got like a, what would you call this? It's like an outliner view. You've got being able to thumbnail refresh and things like that if things aren't updating for you appropriately and so on. So from there, let's go to node details. And so if you've used IlluGen or LiquidGen and so on, you know, this looks pretty familiar. You've just got your tabs here. You've got your node presets, which is something that's a bit different here. And we'll go over node presets in a bit. You've got your favorites. So if you, for instance, hit a star on a parameter, it will move over to your favorites. And now we can kind of come in here and say, change this without having to filter through the node itself. And look for the things that we want to change actively. So I'll unstar that. We've got things on our timeline. We don't have anything on our timeline right now. And then parameters to randomize. And so I'll just show that real quick. Where, for instance, if I shift click my seed here, it's going to randomize this parameter for me. And then I can just come here and randomize it, or, you know, click randomize all. You can also add all seeds for the entire project here, and then just randomize that too. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do within these tabs, but in general, node details is where you are going to be just editing all of your stuff. So whether it's drop downs or curves or whatever, like all the information that you need to actually start generating stuff is going to be in this node details panel. And then finally, over here on the left, we have our timeline. And I'm not going to go over the timeline just yet. That's going to be a bit later in our little master class here, because I'm going to do some animations. But in general, you have your play button or hit space to play the timeline. On most of our presets, you probably just want to hit space by default and see if there's an animation. This is just going to run and run and run forever and ever and ever. And then in general, if you want to view your curves, there is a little curve editor here once you start placing keyframes and stuff like that. But that's something that we can go over a bit later. So that's the gist of the 4 quadrants. Like everything here is really quite simple, I do believe. And so what we're going to do now is kind of go over rerouting and signals. And I'm doing this first because even though we don't quite know what the nodes do yet, and like we haven't really gone over how to generate stuff, I do want to show you just some general graph cleanliness. So for instance, if we come and we see that these little cables are, you know, kind of going under each other and so on. And so I can right click one of the cables and click reroute, right? And that's going to allow me to just come in and bring these little pins. Now, one other thing is, like, let's say that I have another noise and I have all of these little pins here. I can control click this, and that's going to drag off a reroute, but I can also put this reroute on an output pin, and it's going to swap all of those outputs for me without having to reconnect everything. So if you just want to do it, control click and then drag it over, and that's going to give you a cool little quality of life hack, you know, if you decide that you want to change what your input is or something like that. That's really quite nice. Now, you know, let's say that we've cleaned this up, you know, however we want. I know that this isn't like the most cleanly thing in the world, but like, let's just say that this right here is exactly how we want it. But then we've got something really, really far away, and we don't want to have a little thing that comes all the way down here. So what you can do is we can actually make a wireless. So we can send, and we can just call this, output or something. And then we're going to go here, and we're going to say receive. And then you can right click and say, let's see, select connected wired, or sorry, receive from output. There we go. It's kind of hidden for me. And now these two nodes are going to talk to each other wirelessly. And so you can also, for instance, right click a line and you see wireless, and it'll automatically make a wireless output and connect them for you. And if you hover over the wireless, you'll see that it has kind of a ghostly connection telling you where it's going. And you can rename those if you want to, if you don't like the name. But in general, it just says what the pin number is and so on, and names it something default. So that's some general node tidiness stuff for you to know. Now, also, you can say highlight your nodes and hit Alt-A. That's going to arrange your nodes. You can right click, do different alignments, auto arrange, etc., etc. So there's a bunch of little quality of life things that you can do. Moving on from like the general, how do I even use the node graph? Let's talk about basic data types. So in general, whenever we're working in 2D, we really have, as far as I understand, maybe 4 different basic data types. The first data type I want to talk about is grayscale. And you'll notice that on our little nodes here, we have, this is kind of like a, I don't know, like a blue-green color. And that kind of signifies UV outputs. And then we have grayscale, which is colored by this like gray color. And then we have color, which is purple. And you'll notice that some nodes, like this pixelizer, have a top purple and a bottom gray. And that just tells you that it can accept both a colored and a grayscale input. And so you'll notice that this input is only grayscale, meaning it can only accept grayscale. This has the UV input. It can only accept UVs and so on and so forth. And there's a number of different conversions that you can do. So if you're like, hey, I want to take this and I want to make it color, right? You can turn this into an actual colored item if you wanted to export this or something. Or, if you did want to export, you can always come here, export UV, and that'll do something similar for you. But there's conversions for just about every data type we have, including normals and things like that. So from here, I have a little setup here, and the gist is that UVs are basically built-in morphs or flow maps. So they kind of operate both as flow maps and as a morph of sorts. So if I plug this into UV, we can see here we've got our distorted UVs, and you can preview your UVs in different ways. So here's our actual like texture coordinate, and then here it is distorting a grid, and then here's like a different checkerboard. So let's say that we like this grid, and this is how we preview it. If we change to like rotational folding, or we change our scale or whatever, it's going to change all of our previews and stuff live, right? So everything's running on the GPU. It's all going to update live for you. And you'll notice that here it is distorted. You'll also notice that on simpler things like say noise or basically like our generative items like shapes, they're going to have a background pin. And the idea here is that instead of me coming here and saying, hey, let me grab like a triangle or something, and I want to come off and blend these two, and then I just plug it into the foreground, and now we've got this blended shape, and you have a bunch of different options to blend with. You've got, multiply and so on. So let's say that I wanted to multiply it, and this is the result that I was looking for. For us, this is too much work, okay? Like with blend, like it's another node, and so what you can actually do is you could say, come here, plug this into background, and there you go. Like it's automatically going to do blending. And so these nodes, they have like a blending tab, and then you can choose what type of blending mode you want to do. And this just, lets you clean up your graph a little bit and, kind of ensure that you're, keeping your nodes, as simple as possible, keeping your graph as simple as possible. And there are reasons where maybe you do want to use a blur node, or maybe something is so far ahead that like you can't plug it into the background. And then that's the kind of case where you would want to use a blend node. Now, converting this to color, okay? One thing is that in general, like let's say that I have, I don't know if I have one thing. Well, let's just say like export color offhand. Okay, so let's say that I wanted to export my little shape here. And you can see pins have different types. It is not going to let me connect to this, or let's say that I had actually like a blend node and I plug in this color right here, and then I plug this in. It's going to give me a warning. It's going to say, the node graph has errors because now we're trying to blend two different color types that don't actually work. And so one of the things is, and this is like a very key core concept to IlluGen, you're going to do it a trillion times in any node graph, and you're going to want to do a color ramp to convert this. And you just can choose sRGB because everything in IlluGen by default is sRGB, and we plug this in, and now we can actually blend these two appropriately. And so we can come here, like I said, choose min darken or whatever we want, and that's going to allow us to actually blend this thing. And so looking at questions just real quick, Corin Tinley says, hello, I was wondering what were the feedback you have from the industry about the use of IlluGen? Are studios using it, or if older methods are still the most used? I think that other methods are probably still used mostly, but I would say that there's probably at least 15 to 20 like professional game studios using IlluGen right now, potentially more. And I do know that those studios are, converting quite a lot over to IlluGen. And so we're still early in like our process of trying to get studios to convert and teach them and, do training calls and stuff like that. So, but it is a thing. And I do know that people are starting to fall in love with IlluGen. And that's my hope for this stream, is that I'll teach you and show you what it can do. And you'll see that this is better than most of the older methods that are out there. And the next question is, are there plans for support for GLTF or USD model import? I know you have used custom importers as you have priority for speed, but it'd be great to have support for FOSS formats. I'm not entirely sure if we'll have GLTF. I do know that we want to have USD, but it's going to be a long time. It's a really complicated format, and we kind of failed to do it on IlluGen 2 internally. So probably after IlluGen 2 is released, we'll try and get USD sometime later. And you also said that you're a big fan. Thank you. All right. So moving back in to this, you can see that we also have something called like utilities. And so in this case, we've got a utility and it can turn things into pixel, like a pixel, thing. If we right click, you can see that we have a number of different things, and they're all categorized basically by their data type. So, we have grayscale. We have a bunch of different generators for grayscale, whether you're extracting slices or creating caustics, or, you want to do polar scattering. We've got color, which this is generally either you are, say, converting something from grayscale to a color, like with our color ramp, or you are editing something that is already colored. So maybe you're, adjusting the colors or replacing certain pixel colors and so on. We also have, like I said, conversions. If you want to, say, split your alpha channel, from this. So we can come here, alpha split. And this right here is going to let us take our alpha channel. And so by default, inside of like our color ramp, you can see that the alpha source, you can choose like, how is my alpha channel even being generated in this? And so now if I preview this, we can preview this like with a little alpha channel as well with this little thing once it turns into a colored output. So that's just, some interesting things, just about like what our basic data types are. Utilities are basically things that happen after you already have the data. And then you have things like this, which are kind of generating shapes. And then this, which is kind of morphing your shapes and creating more interesting things. Harsha, I will go into visualizing GeoMask a little bit later. So Ryan says, I would like to see an example of distorting a pre-made flipbook. I tried here before, but it never really looked good. Maybe something like turning a magic flipbook into poison or something. I have an example coming up for you. So we'll go over that as well. And then let's see. Diogo says, I own a license, but I never used it. Is it possible to import a separate image file and use it in the graph? Absolutely. You can even like go to Google or something and click copy image, and then you can paste images into your graph as well. So you can even copy and paste stuff. All right. Moving into like general utilities, and as we go on, things are going to start getting more and more advanced, and we're going to show you more specific use cases for things. So in this case, like let's say for instance, I want to make a simple flare or like a glow or something like that. So I've got this little shape that I've edited. You can see that, we have this relative width, and as I change it, it's changing down the line. And so let's just put this back at 10. And then I use my blending that I just taught you about with the background node to kind of add these two shapes together, because without it, I've got this, and then I can come in and blend that. And then I notice, I'm like, hey, I've got this kind of hard edge. I don't really like that. That's just, kind of an artifact of blending these types of gradients together. It's kind of a common issue. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to just create a blur, right? And so I'm going to use my blur utility to actually blur this. And then I'm like, okay, well, I want to transform this and I want to create two little stars. And the way that I do that is I come in and I say, hey, my position is going to be negative 20, 25, or negative 25 and negative 25 on X and Y. And that's going to put me over here at the bottom. And then I say, hey, I also want to mirror horizontally. You can mirror vertically as well. But either way, so we're going to mirror horizontally, and then I'm going to use Cartesian to polar. And so these right here are three different utilities that I'm using. And what that ends up creating is something like this. And then one interesting little tip for you is if we kind of go outside of what my plan was, we can do, say, a color ramp. And you can see that IlluGen, it starts to learn the types of things that I want. And so it's already suggesting in this little tiny icon bar a color ramp. So I'm just going to bring that in. I'm going to click it. We're going to do color ramp. I'm going to make sure it's sRGB. And then I can do something like a directional blur. And I could, say do directional blur with color, but I'm missing my chromatic shift option. And so chromatic shift is only available in directional blur with colors. And so now I'm going to just say that that's 100. I'm going to do something like a UV radial. And so we have a bunch of different UV radial, or rather UV options. And so if I come here, we have a bunch of different distortion types that you can do. So whether it's blending UVs or blurring them, rotational, polar, UV noise, transforms, etc. So there's a bunch of stuff. And so now we have this directional blur. And we've created this kind of colored rainbow effect. And then I could come in and do something like maybe a glow. And now I have this really, really cool flare. And, there may be some kind of instance where I'm like, hey, you know what? I really want to scale this down. Like my edges are really close. And I'm kind of hitting the edge here. So I can do, another transform. We could say my scale is maybe 90. And then I can come here and make this glow, right? So and you'll notice that whenever I click off, it like loads this thing. That's because it goes by default to my render node, which is down here. This spawns with kind of all of your presets whenever you create a new one. So that's why it keeps flickering back to that screen. But in general, this is just a really simple, a few transforms and a couple of utilities to create this really interesting lens flare effect. So a more complicated data type, and this is our next data type in the list, is going to be islands. And so let's say that, for instance, theoretically, and, with this stuff, like, we can have like randomized intensity ranges and stuff like that. And so like I can do a lot of the stuff that I'm about to show you within the node itself. But let's just say, for instance, there's, some scenario where I don't want to use the intensity in my tiles because maybe I'm using this as a mask somewhere else, but I do want randomized colors. Well, what I can do is I can use an islands node. In Substance Designer, I believe they call this flood fill. This is really similar. We just call it islands because it's basically little islands. And what you can see is it's going to select all these shapes. And then from there, we have a number of different outputs that we can do. We can say, hey, like, where's my padding, or, give me the UVs, or give me grayscale or gradients or whatever. And so once we have UVs, now I can take this and do, say, star or something, and now it's going to create something like this. Now, one thing that I don't know and I need to figure out more of is how do I actually make sure that like I only apply this to like the little stars and not have the original star in the background. I don't know how to do that yet, so I need to learn that on my own time. But in general, this is how you create like island-based UVs. You can also do like randomized gradients per tile. So say you have rocks and you want them to like be sticking out of the dirt or something at different heights. Being able to do island to gradient is a very, very useful thing. So this right here just kind of gives you a very quick sneak peek into what islands could potentially do for you. And it can select things like, let's say if we have this noise, and then I come and I edit my curve, so like my per octave curve, and I plug this in. We can see here, and I can change like my threshold, and it's going to start selecting like little islands for me. And you can kind of see how I can then create random gradients on these islands and so on. So it's kind of interesting. So the next thing is kind of controls in the 3D viewport is what I wanted to show here. So if you want to actually like preview textures and stuff on your mesh, so I have this little geometry sweep that I've kind of come in, and I believe Harsha said, how do I visualize a geomask? Well, the way that you do it is you click this little square with an A, and that's going to visualize geomasks. And later on, we're actually going to be using a geometry mask for something that we're going to create from our geometry nodes, and you'll be able to see kind of that workflow there. But in this case, you can input, say, normals or roughness, metalness, etc. So all your PBR stuff, if you want to import a skybox or something to have HDRI lighting, this is where you would do it. And so this is kind of the gist. And if you want to control things, you just hold Alt left click to kind of rotate around. You can use your middle mouse button to kind of pan around, and your mouse wheel zooms in and out. And that's really kind of the gist of these controls. You do have like a grid that you can have, and then you have shape shadows if you want them or not. That's pretty much the gist. And if there's some kind of instance where you want to hide your gizmos, you can go to this little drop down and hide your gizmos. So that's that. Now, the next thing is going to be animating parameters. And I believe Ryan wanted me to show like how do I edit a flipbook, and that's going to be right afterwards. So one of the big value adds for IlluGen is being able to actually animate pretty much anything we want, right? We're not stuck with just default variables and stuff like that. So if I bring in a noise and I want to do 3D noise and I want to animate this over time, what I can do is I can just click this little drop down. And some things in particular, if they have a modulator like this, and I'm going to go over modulators here in a second, but if they have a modulator, which is this, you usually have to click these little tiny arrows. And then those arrows are then going to allow you to override that parameter on the graph or on the timeline. So for instance, if I want to override this, and let's just say I click once, what that's going to do is it's going to expose that to my timeline. And so here at the bottom, we can see that I have noise, Z position, and I can just shift click to add some keys. And like I said, you do have a curve editor. So if we wanted to, have some kind of curve or something, you can come in here and edit curves. In my case, I don't. I just want this to be, say, interpolation mode, linear. I can check my curve. We can see that it is indeed linear again. And so I've got my two little keys, and let's just say that I want to go from 0 to, 5%. And now whenever I click R to reset my timeline, you can see that our output here is actually moving. And I can change like my octaves or something, maybe change my Z layers, change kind of my scale a little bit. And now you can see, hopefully, on stream that this is actually moving during the animation. Now, what if I don't want to do the hard manual work of keyframing stuff? Well, I can click again. It's going to say, hey, you're going to delete your keys if you do this. I'm going to say continue. And now we have the ability to do oscillators. And so this is another data type that we have. So you can do oscillators. You can even do stuff like MIDI and ADSR if you're musically inclined and want to control things with a physical like touchpad or something. But in general, let's just do a mod cycle. And what this is going to do is it's just going to create this kind of sawtooth wave. It's just going to go from 0 to 100, from 0 to 100, from 0 to 100, or whatever my range is that I set. And so now we've got kind of this animation. And so you can bake this as a flip book. You can bake it as like an animated threshold texture or whatever it is that you want. But in general, this is how you're going to actually animate stuff. Now, of course, like you can do it for anything, like I said. So, like let's say that I have this width and I have my rotation and I do that. And then I have like this scale and I do that. I can plug this in and we're going to get these rotations and scales and so on and so forth. And, maybe I want this to be, an actual oscillator. So I want it to go up and down, but I want it to scale between, these values or whatever it happens to be. Let me make sure I disconnect my other signal. And so now we've got this, right? So we've got this little spinning thing and we can just animate whatever we want. So that's pretty interesting. And that's how you animate your parameters. But I'm going to go ahead and stop that and delete this node. You can delete nodes either by right-clicking and delete, or just click delete on your keyboard. So encoding and decoding. So you can import models, you can import textures, you can import image sequences into IlluGen so that you can further author them. The only limitation with meshes is we do not support animated meshes right this second, but we hope to in a future update. So for now, let's say that we have this sprite sheet, and this is a cool little animation that I've done of some kind of like magic smoke globe or something, and it is a looping texture that I created in IlluGen. But we'll notice that this is a sprite sheet, and like I've come in, I've said, hey, here's my file name, and I haven't really touched anything else, but let's just, increase the scale of our texture because this is like a 2K texture, and I want to make sure that I'm sampling the full resolution of this texture. So now we've got our 2K texture, even though our graph is 1024, and now we can utilize this. So to actually decode something, we can come here and we can say sheet decode. This is a utility, and we want to tell it, hey, I believe this is 8 by 8. So we've got 8 columns and 8 lines, and then my first frame is 0, and we're just going to hit play, and we're going to see what happens. And we'll notice that it plays and then it stops, but this is a looping texture, so we can hit loop here, and it's just going to loop this texture forever and ever and ever. And now we have this animation that we can do something with. So let's say, for instance, that we want to bulge this thing to make it look more 3D and make it feel like it's fitting a globe. And then we want to repack that and export it. So this is something that IlluGen cannot do for you, but that IlluGen can. So what we can do is let's bring off, say, a transform. I'm going to bring on a UV radial, and we'll see that right now the UV radial has kind of pushed my little globe way too far. But we have this little curve, and many parameters inside of IlluGen have a curve, where you have this little curve, and it says distance to center modulation. And if I drag this, and if we preview our little UV here, you can see that as I mess with this curve, it actually can bulge these UVs for me. And so I'm just going to bulge this UV. I'm going to preview my actual texture, and we're going to just move this curve until it fits right on the edge. And so now we've gone from flat to bulged, and now it looks like my smoke is kind of in a globe or whatever. So, hey, Big Dream, by the way, guys, Big Dream VFX in the chat is like a IlluGen master. So be sure to say hello to Big Dream. And so in general here, we've got this bulge, and now we've kind of got this little 3D effect. And then let's say that, maybe there's something else we want to do. Maybe we want to come in and we want to threshold this texture. We can actually see that we cannot threshold it. So what we can do is we can do, say, RGB to grayscale, something like this. Or we could, say, select just the R channel or something. But what we can do is, instead of inputting a color, I'm going to do RGB to grayscale all the way back here. I'm just going to set my values to be something like this until, let's kind of tweak it until it looks just about right. I think that's probably pretty good. So now what we can do is I'm going to plug this in. It's going to convert my little graph to grayscale. And now I can use threshold because we can see that threshold only accepts a grayscale input. And so now we've got this little threshold, and let's just kind of like smooth it out. And I'm just going to create something for whatever reason, like let's say that this is the edited flipbook that I want. And like, for whatever reason, I like it. This is exactly how I wanted it. Maybe I only wanted to say threshold the top so I can modulate this. And so now I'm going to kind of tell you about modulators. So anytime there is a little, sine wave icon, it means that you can modulate it. And that means that you can plug in a mask to say where something is or isn't going to happen. And so with this threshold mod, let's say that I took a gradient, maybe like so, and then I want it to be, say, linear vertical, and then I'm going to flip it. So if you need to flip something the other way, you can just click this little flip vertically icon, and that's going to flip it. And then wherever this is white, basically, it is going to threshold for me. And so we can kind of change the smoothness and then threshold this or whatever. And that threshold is really only going to apply, where I have this, these colors. And so actually it looks like it's not working very well. This is a bad example. Anyway, you can modulate stuff, but I have better modulating examples here in a bit. So let me just go back to my stuff here. And like I said, let's say that this is what we want. So now we can encode this. So we've got our sheet encode. We're going to come here. We can just restart the graph. So you do have to restart your timeline. You can see that this is re-encoded. And so now we've got our animation and all of our changes and the UV distortion and everything. It's kind of re-encoded. And, let's say that maybe I wanted to color this like some specific way. So I think you said you wanted like a potion or something. So let's say that we like this color. We can plug that into sheet encode. And now we have encoded our, thresholded, transformed looping animation. And if you want to test this to make sure that it is indeed exactly what you want, you can come in here. We will bring in our little sheet decode again. And now this is reading the actual texture. It's not coming from this. It is coming from this right here. And so we are decoding this texture once again. And it's quite nice. So you'll see that once a sheet decode happens, it just kind of stops computing the graph once it's done. And if you want it to recompute, you do have to hit R on your keyboard or the little redo icon all the way here at the left. So pretty interesting. Moving into actual modulation that I know for a fact will work. Let's say that I wanted to change, say, the overall intensity, or maybe like the intensity and the overall visibility based on, some kind of input shape. So we can modulate these two. And I'm just going to bring in my little handy dandy star texture. And so you can see that wherever there's black, we have basically 0 intensity. And so we can come in here and kind of change the intensity range and so on. And make sure that, modulation is only affecting a portion of it or whatever. So we can kind of change the range at which this modulates. And so let's say that we like that particular range, but then we definitely want to say, hey, anywhere it's black, I do not want it to appear, but I like these ranges. So I can plug this into my visibility mod, and basically anything that is in black is just not going to show up. It's not going to paint that on inside of our little fractal node. And so this is how you can use modulation. Modulation is a very, very powerful option, and we'll be using it a little bit later in some of our examples. So going on to a really handy tool, and I think that this is one of the coolest things in IlluGen. This is something that I came up with because I was tired of going through and just kind of scrolling through. So actually, preview matrix for fractals the wrong one. So let me bring noise. And so what it is if you hit Control-Shift-M, or if you right-click, open preview matrix, and I think there's also view preview matrix up here. So there's 3 different ways to get to it, but the shortcut is Control-Shift-M. And so with this, the idea behind the preview matrix is, first, let me just show you the example of why I wanted us to build this. So for instance, if we have Voronoi noise, and so we come here, we've got a neat little noise, and it's pretty cool. And then we've got these different octaves, and you can see that if I come here and I hit my arrow keys, I can see all these different variations, right? But then the other problem is that we have other parameters like Euclidean and square Euclidean and Manhattan and Chebyshev and whatever. And then we've got like F1, F2, randomized difference, so on. Like there's just a bunch of different parameters. And I'm like, can I just have a grid to show me all of this? So if I open my preview matrix and I go to say Voronoi distance type, now we can see square, Euclidean, Manhattan, etc. And then I want to do say my Voronoi or maybe noise octave combination. And now this is going to show me every possible variation between those two drop downs. And if I click these, and I can even scale this up, right? So if I have these, I can come in and it's going to select the two drop down options that correspond to wherever in the grid that I'm clicking. So this is really, really awesome. It's a great way to just kind of come in and you can change the zoom, because some people had said that they wanted to be able to zoom because by default it was like this big, and sometimes that's just not big enough to see some of the details. So you can come in here and compare stuff. We could say like, what does it look like if I have like different levels of roughness? I want 10 different levels of it. And so we can see like, here's the texture getting rougher and rougher or less rough. And just, it helps you figure out like, what do these things mean? What if I have like, different noise types versus my noise octave combinations? And so you can just see all this different stuff and see all the different little noise types that you can generate. And this is a fantastic way to preview all of your stuff without having to go through different drop downs and so on. And then like, let's say that there's something that you like. So like, let's say like this right here is a really weird little noise, but I'm going to go in and maybe increase my roughness. And let's say that this is something that like, I really, really like this. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to click the plus sign and I'm going to say that this right here is, I don't know, let's call it, planetary noise 1. All right. So now in the future, now that I've created that node preset, if I want to do planetary noise, planetary noise 1, now I can spawn that. And so I've got all these little node presets here. We've got Voronoi edges. So we can just view this output. We've got like Voronoi edges or simplex or quantized simplex or my planetary noise and so on and so forth. And you can share these presets with other artists on your team or whatever, it happens to be. So that's kind of the overview of a preview matrix and a little, preview of being able to save different node presets. I'm going to show you some other ways you can use node presets later. Exporting in general, you can export models, colors, or multi-mask. And the reason I want to show this is like, if we wanted to export, say, this little plane of geometry, you've got export model and so on, and you can choose, say, centimeters is the default that you would want to export to Unreal with. You can export color, which is just basically any colored input. So if I take this, it is not going to work. You do have to use, say, a color ramp first, sRGB, and then color, and now it'll work, right? And you can also say, yes, I also want to export the alpha channel. And you just select your folder, export now, and voila, it's going to work. How do you share presets across workstations? Inside of the Jenga effects folder and your IlluGen like install location, there's a like node presets folder. You would have to share that. And we don't have a way right this second, I don't think, to have like a external link where if you say, hey, we have a shared drive across our studio, this is where all of the studio wide like node presets and subgraphs live, like also pull from this folder location. I don't think we have that yet, but that's something that I want us to add. So hopefully we can have that in a future update. And then exporting multi-mask is quite important. So like, let's say that I have, this shape and I've got my little star and I've got a square and whatever. So you can do something called RGB merge. And this is really useful for packing different textures of different colors. And so we've got this thing. And so in my red channel, I've got this, and in my green channel and in my blue channel. But if you don't want to do an RGB a merge and then export a color, and if you just want to do that directly in a mask in general, so you can just do RGB, make sure you pack your A channel as well if you want one. You don't have to have one. And that's pretty much the gist, right? And you can say, yes, this is sRGB, or no, it's not. and then you export it and you are good to go. And that's going to export these different textures in that particular channel. So really, really quite cool. So let's show like a little useful example of like, okay, Nick, like you've shown us some cool stuff, but how do I actually create something that's, interesting, and, maybe I want to create a subgraph out of something. So let's create curl noise from scratch. So the first thing we want to do, and if you don't know what curl noise is, you will see here in a second. I have a whole article on it on our website. If you go to jngfx.com, you look under, I believe, like either support or like learning resources or something. There is a got to be less than 2 milliseconds article section, and then in there is our curl noise. So I wrote an extensive article about exploring it. But to create it, we need to create a noise, and then we have a directional blur. And then what we can do is we can drag off of this. We'll say UV from derivative. And so if you want to create a UV from a grayscale input, this is how you would do it. Let me just go ahead and delete my little comment here because it's in the way. And so I've got my noise, and so far we're not really seeing any curl. In fact, we're not really seeing anything happen. So let's go ahead and duplicate this and create another noise. Now for curl noise to work, you do need a different seed, you do need like a different scale and so on. And I'm going to blur this because I figured out with curl noise, you need a blur. And so what we can do is I'm now going to plug this into my grayscale input. And now we see that something kind of happened. And in directional blur, we do want our sample distribution to be first only. So we're saying that, hey, we don't want it to happen over like a certain range. So like if I come here, like I don't want it to just like blur the stuff for me. I want to only take the very first sample, which is the farthest away sample. And I just want to have that one particular frame. And then we'll see that this isn't particularly curly. So you do need to rotate your vectors by 90 degrees. And so we're taking this input, we're gonna, warp our little texture, and then we're gonna spin those vectors around 90 degrees. And now you can see that we've got this cool little thing that's kind of pushing the texture around. So this is quite nice. It's quite beautiful. And so if we edit this texture here, this is going to kind of control, what our different curls look like, what is the scale of these curls and so on. And inside of our directional blur, this is where we can control, say, the strength. So if you wanted to, say, animate something that's kind of fluid-like, this is how you would do it with some kind of curl noise or something. So this is really quite, a cool way to generate these interesting patterns. And of course, this does tile natively because most things in IlluGen, if you tell it, hey, I want it to tile, it is going to tile for you flawlessly. And if something does not tile flawlessly, it is a bug, and you should report the bug to us, please. So in general, that's kind of how you create your curl noise. But there's one thing, and this is important. Curl is kind of defined, by these little slopes. And so the darkest area means that there's less strength on the curl. But whenever we plug it into this, we're just rotating things at 90 degrees. And we're just saying that everything is 90 degrees and everything is 100% intensity based on what we've input. And that is not completely correct. So we're going to modulate this, and we are going to take this blur. We're going to use a levels node, and we are going to inverse this and flip it. And even though it's a very small change, now we have, so if we take this, we have very hard edged curl, and then here we have a much softer curl noise. And so this right here is technically like the correct curl noise. And so this right here is interesting. And this is just a quick little demo showing something a bit more complicated. Now let's say that I really, really like this and I never want to build this graph again in my life. We can come here, right click, convert to subgraph. And we're going to double click to go into the subgraph. And we can say subgraph output. And then here, like, let's say if we want, to have like a input in the future for, UV noise, we can call this a UV noise or something. You can say, hey, I want to make sure that my octaves are on my parent. And so if we hover over this, it doesn't show you a way to do it, but you have to right click, add to parent. So we can say, hey, I want to add this to my parent. I want to add, whatever else to my parent. And so you've got all these different things. Now, if we go back to my root, you can see that I have control over those individual little items that I've added, and simplex, or rotation, or whatever it happens to be. And then I can come here and I can say, hey, this is curl noise, right? And so now that I've got that, I can come here, curl noise, and I can spawn that subgraph. I can add whatever parameters I want to it. You'll have to go through and figure out what's important to you. But now this is a custom function that we have built, that we can use curl noise in any other project now that we have saved this subgraph. So that is pretty cool. And you can see that we do have a number of subgraphs as well. So like this is a grunge one, and you can see that Jill has decided to use, say, like primary modulation because he wanted to call it different things and so on. Smoothness or coverage, smudge, etc. And so then whenever you come in here, you've got like different, ways to generate this like custom, more advanced noise and stuff without having to go in and rebuild all of those nodes and stuff. Ryan says, will this project file be available, or is this just the same tutorial project from before? Now, this is a brand new tutorial project. I'm just kind of going through and doing stuff, but I can make it available if you want me to. So from there, let's see. We've got custom node names and functions. So I've kind of, gone through that. So like, for instance, let's say that like I'm always doing halftone stuff and, or whatever. So like I said, you can come here, plus say halftone. And now, instead of having to come to say pixelizer and then select, whatever I had to select for this, so say halftone and so on, and then change my, variations or whatever, I can just come here and say, you know what, halftone, there you go. That's it. So you utilize node presets, or if there's something where you're like, you know what, like Nick, islands, I am never, ever going to call it islands. I know it as flood fill. I'm just going to call it flood fill. And now if you come here, flood fill, you will notice that we do have an actual flood fill node already. It does something else. But you can have it named flood fill, and now it works with your thing. So if your muscle memory is, you're just like, I'm always going to call islands flood fill, well, make a little preset for it or whatever. One other thing I did it for is say invert or inverse. I would always come here and I would say invert, and it didn't exist because you actually have to do a levels node and flip the curve. So I created a preset that's invert or inverse. No matter what I type, it's going to invert the texture for me, and I am satisfied and my workflow is easier. And you'll notice that I also added this for, say, something like bevel. So if you want to bevel shapes, it's actually a distance node with a negative distance. And so really, really cool to just kind of come in and say, hey, like I built this little bevel function, but I want everybody to know that it's called bevel, or they ask, why do we not have a bevel node? So I went in and added an official node preset called bevel, and it's actually a distance node. The more you know. Lucian said, can we share node presets across a team that's all using IlluGen, like checking them into version control? If you all have the same like install folder and you're running it off of a shared drive, yes. But we don't have a way yet to point to a shared folder of specific presets, but that's a feature that we want to add here in the future, because I know that it's really quite important. And 1 second, I need some water. Alrighty, so from here, like that's kind of the gist of like custom node names and functions. And what time is it? We're 1 hour in. All right, we probably got like an hour to go. So basic geometry. So now we've kind of showed you like the 2D workflow, and let's talk about basic geometry. So with our geometry nodes, of course, we have a number of different geometry presets, whether it's a bowl or a plane or a polar disc or a sphere spiral or a spinning top or, a tornado or whatever, right? So there's a bunch of stuff that you are able to do with, say, just very simple nodes like GeoSweep. And of course you can have like input paths. You can come in and manipulate this geometry. So for instance, a very, very simple geometry manipulation is I have a geometry shape, and this node, it allows you to create, say different little primitives of different sizes and, different UV tiling rates. And so you can see they are all UV'd by default. You can choose like, where do your UVs work? How much does it tile? So on and so forth. Like there's a trillion little options. You can flip the faces if you want, and so on and so forth. You can say, hey, I want triangles, I want, alternate triangles, I want whatever. Like whatever your specific use case is for what you're going to use it for, you can do it with geometry nodes in general. And so let's say that I have this shape and I like it, and I want to subdivide it, and then I want to displace it. That is kind of the simplest like set of geometry operations that I can think of. And you can see here that like if we kind of turn off our wireframe, we've got a nice little render of this thing. And of course, like it's all live. So if, I scale this noise or whatever, and I start changing things, like I can actively change how all of this stuff is kind of affecting my shapes and so on. So let's kind of go through a mildly complicated example of geometry nodes where we're going to set up a series of points, and there's already a preset for this in IlluGen, but I wanted to show it live and kind of show you how you can build it, and a couple of gotchas that you might have, or if you're trying to recreate it and it's just not working, then hopefully this will show you how you can work through it. So what we've got is we've got a geopoints shape. And so if I come here, I click Z, it's going to show me the top here. And so basically I've come here, I've added spline points. So you can just double click to add splines. And so let me just delete the node. And we're going to say geopoint shape. All right, so we've got our geopoint shape node. We're going to click it. And points, they're really cool. They're going to be especially useful when particles are a thing in one of our next updates. But in general, points allow you to do all sorts of different sampling or instancing objects. So like, let's say that I wanted to instance, let's see, geocopy to points. Now, one thing that I don't like about this is that it just plugs into the geometry. You need to plug it into points. And then like, let's say we have a, I don't know, let me create like a little cube or something. So we've got a little cube, and let me come here, and let's just say that it's like one subdivision on each side, and then my scale is like really, really small, and I copy to points, and boom. Now we have a bunch of little cubes instanced to all these points. And then you could come in and you can say, hey, like I want to like randomly rotate these per point or whatever. Like there's a bunch of things that you can do to start building procedural geometry with these geometry nodes. So let's go ahead into our geopoint shape, and we're going to create a line. So let's do a spline 2D. I'm going to go to my Z. I'm just going to double click here and double click here. And like right now, we don't have like snapping to my knowledge for splines. Like splines are kind of a pain in the ass in IlluGen. I will be completely candid and honest with you about that. But one thing that we did add is a way to come in and manually input, say, the X and Y values. Let's say we want to do 100 and negative 100. And so this is going to give us something that is basically 2 meters long because these are in centimeters. And then I'm going to come to my geometry points, and I'm going to say, make sure that you create a UV attribute. What that's going to allow me to do is operate on these points per point, like translate them and scale them and so on. And then if we come here, like let's just do like 50 points. And so you can see here, we've got these little points. If you want to see them bigger, you can click this little UV option. And I found out like that's just a way to display them kind of differently. So now we've got these points, and somebody had asked me earlier, how do you actually use like a geo mask? So here is a mask. So let's say geo mask. And what I want to do is I want to make the beginning points black, and then I want to make these black, and I want it to go white. So basically a little gradient. And so here we've got, say, mask A. And so we're telling it like, this is the channel that we're going to store information in for the geometry. We're just going to replace everything, right? But you can do other blending modes too. We're going to just mask it using a curve. And we have a little curve browser here. If you click the drop down, and I just want it to go up, down. But I'm actually going to make it do something kind of like this because I really want it to be like just on the end. We have, this black color, and then have it be pretty bright white throughout the center. And you'll see why we're doing that here in a second. But you can see that like we have it be ID based. It's based on the point ID. You can like change the phase of this, so you can animate it over time or whatever you want to do. You can have it repeat. There's just a number of cool options with this. So now what I want to do is let's go ahead and scale my points. So I want my points at the bottom because this is going to be a lightning strike, right? So we want a lightning strike to just kind of come through and, have like a lot of cool angles and stuff like that. And so what I need is I want it to basically start from nothing, grow into a large shape, and then go back down to nothing. So to do that, we're going to do a point scale, right? And if you go to your geometry nodes and you hover, you can look and see like every single geometry node that we have. And here's a little preview of some really, really sick shapes that are coming in the future, like full-on hexagons where every hexagon is an independent shape and so on. So lots of cool stuff is coming in the next update. But anyway, so we've got our geoscale points. And we're just going to come here and we're going to do this. And so we're going to say base it on mask A. And we're going to do replace. And then we're going to say that it is based on our point ID. And let's make sure that we have like our scale range. And let me preview it like this. So if you're stuck on mask, like it's not really going to show those points very well. We do have to come here and view our viewport rendering. So we've got this, and we're going to just kind of scale it like so. But I'm going to go and grab a custom curve, and we're going to do something maybe like this. Then I'm going to select these little pivot points and bring them up like so. So this is pretty cool. Now we've got this little thing. We've got something that starts basically at nothing, grows and grows, and then it goes back down to 0. Now let's do something called an X form. I believe this used to be called like transform, but now we call it X form. And so we've got geo X form. We can come here and let's once again select our mask. We want to operate only on mask A, and let me show you why. So if we have our stuff, let's do an add global. All of this seems correct. We want to transform it, let's say based on texture access. And so let's just plug in, say, a noise. And then what we want to do is we want to make sure that this translates. And so we can see here, we've got UV. We need to select UV points, right? So we want to make sure, because it's looking for like UV channels 0 through 3 for normal geometry. But we want to say that this is specific to points. So that's our UV set. That's the only thing you need to change. And now, whenever we're here, as we add this translation, now we're starting to get something that's noisy and it looks like lightning and so on. And you're starting to be able to see the outline of something that could really be quite cool. Now, I think that our point density is probably a bit too high. So maybe let's do 25 and then see if we need to change anything here in just a little bit. So we've got something like that. I think that's pretty cool. Let's copy and paste this. And, if you can see, like our end point here has kind of shifted, and this is why we need to use our mask, because the mask is going to basically say, hey, because we can see here that like our values are, grayscale towards the bottom. And so we can basically see like, hey, the whatever we're doing in X form is going to have less influence the darker the mask is, basically. And this applies to any shape. It can be, full on geometry that has a custom mask. And it can even be like a texture-based mask from what I understand. And then you can do certain transformations or whatever only on specific parts of a mesh. So we're going to plug in this geo X form again, and we're going to say mask A, and you can see that it's already kind of like doing some like really weird stuff. So let's plug in our grayscale input, but we're going to like kind of shift this kind of upwards, and I'm going to just keep that translation how it was. And we're just going to kind of curl these points because I want the shape to kind of come up and be able to wrap around. And now let's do what we've all been waiting for, which is a geo sweep. So with geo sweep, it's going to say, hey, I'm going to take one of the points and I'm just going to step through them because they all have an ID, right? So we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so on and so forth. So we're just going to kind of sweep through all those points in order, and then voila, we have this. And this looks like crap, right? So you're like, oh, my mesh is completely blown up. No, we just need to come in here and adjust our size. So it looks like we need to do extruded path. We need to change the size here. And so let's just do something maybe like 2 or something. And then we can lower, say, our segment count. So let's look at this. You can see that we did have like a lot of segments. We'll just say it's a segment of 1. You can also do stuff like, say, a circle. And what that'll do is it will allow you to extrude, say, a cylinder along the whole thing. So if you wanted to extrude like a pipe or something, this is kind of the way to do it. And we can see here that maybe my Z transformation was a bit bad. Let's go up here, see our overall shape. And so we've got this. So I think that this is a pretty interesting lightning strike. Maybe we want to do something like 250. Bring it like that. And then let's translate this kind of as a whole, something like so. And I think I'm kind of happy with this. Like this is interesting. And then we can come to geo points. And as we lower it, we're going to get more and more like harsh edges, which is what I'm looking for. And the reason is because if I come to, say, spline in 2D, so now we're going back to our 2D graph. If I click this and I create a little spline, it's practically impossible to get hard edges with this. Even if I change like my intensity to just be like super, super hard, like we don't have a way to control like the little control points and stuff. And even if we did, it's not going to be sharp. So what I'm going to show you may blow your mind. So if we come here, what we could do is we can do geo render to texture. So we're like 90% done with our little effect that we're working on here. So just bear with me. So now we're going to go into the 2D viewport. We're going to say that the camera is something like this. And if we want to, we can scale our points, a little bit more viciously, something like that. And then, do something like this. So like we can like scale our stuff, scale our lightning. Maybe we see that, we actually still want to see our beam right here. So we can kind of adjust this. And so this right here is going to be our actual texture. And so now that we've got this, let's make sure that we choose, say, grayscale. And with this, like we can choose a lot of stuff. Like we can say, give me like the UVs in like this custom space. So now like say if I had, say, a shape and I plug this into UVs, it's going to stretch that shape over my actual 3D shape, but in 2D space. Like this is insanely powerful because now I can have like hard angled procedural stuff that I'm controlling with geometry and then project different textures on it into 2D, right? Like something like this, creating this procedurally with just 2D nodes would be really, really hard. But now you're starting to see why we are merging 3D and 2D stuff together, because we want you to be able to create stuff like this that is usually a bit difficult. And if we wanted to say maybe FXAA to kind of fix some of the aliasing or something, that'll kind of help with some of these edges and so on. But in general, this is really, really quite cool. So if we delete these two, what I actually want to do is I want to do a grayscale, but I want to use this as a mask. So now we have this kind of hard-edged lightning shape and so on. And one other thing is that this shape is highly determined based on my seed. So I can come here and I'm going to find a seed that I really like. Maybe something like that. I think that's a pretty cool seed, right? It's quite interesting. We can come in, we can change like the scale and so on. So now we've got this little procedural 3D, lightning generator. And like, let's say that I like this. We do know that in the second transform, we kind of edited our Z a little bit. And so like, let's do something like that. And let's say that I really, really like this one. Okay, so we're locked in on it. Now, I'm going to teach you something that you can do with sheet encode called accumulating. And so one thing that I found out just playing around with IlluGen is that if you have a glow, sure, like it does on the outside, but if you use a negative intensity, it actually does like a negative like subtraction effect on the inside of a shape. And the cool thing is like, let's say that I wanted to bake in this animation in a texture. So what I can do is I'm going to bring my intensity. I'm going to add it to the timeline. And I'm going to say on frame 0, you are basically 0. And on frame 255, because there's 256 values in a grayscale texture or in a specific channel. So 0 to 255 is 256 frames. And I'm going to say go linearly. I do not want Bezier as my curve type. And so now, whenever I restart this, theoretically, oh, I actually have to tell it to be 100. There we go. So be 100, or sorry, negative 100. There we go. And so we've got something like this, or not, if, okay, there we go. So now it's 0 to negative 100. And so now we are animating this thing. And I do think I need to reverse this. So this is going to be negative 100, and this is going to be 0. And if not, then we will reverse it another way. So basically, we've got that. And now we want to store that animation. So we're going to say sheet encode. We're going to say that we have 256 frames. 256 frames. Let's see, first frame, stride, 256, let's see, 1 by 1, number of frames. Oh yeah, maybe my stride is 256. And then we're going to accumulate. Okay, yes. So stride is what you want to do. You want to say number of frames, columns, and count. And then we come here, and it's going to accumulate these frames over time for me. And it's going to generate a texture that looks like so. And let me just reverse this. Let's say 0 to negative 100. And let's just see how that encodes real quick. It's very similar. So we can come here. We can also say, like, let's do maybe maximum and get a bit more precision here inside of our thing, or we can just do average or whatever. So you have a number of different things. Let's maybe do uniform. I think that's probably a bit better. And so we're encoding these frames in kind of different ways. And what we can do here is now we can say threshold. And so we can go here. And as we change, say, our threshold, we can animate this lightning over time. So now we have that animation stored. So if we're in our game engine, we can actually threshold this over time. And if you want to, you can come here, you can say levels. And if you want to make like absolute certain that you're getting your full range out of this, you can come in, do this, and now we've got our threshold. And then you can do something like, say, a glow or whatever to kind of simulate what would happen in your engine. And then we say color this. So let's do a color ramp. We can choose, I don't know, maybe let's choose this purple or something like so. And then as we animate our threshold, we can kind of see this, and let's change, say, something like this. So we're just kind of changing a few things and just kind of seeing what happens. We can change the color of the hue, and voila. We've got a little interesting strike. And so that was, kind of a lot of work to do something, or rather a lot of talking on my end. But this is really quite a cool method to generate like animated erosion textures. So you would just export this to your game, and then you could do like your subtraction stuff in a material shader to get this animation out of it without having to bake this down into a flipbook. And so you could bake it down into a flipbook if you did, say, something like a sheet encode. And let's say that we wanted that over, I don't know, 16 frames or something. And then that would be 4 by 4. And then let's just say that we want to animate our threshold over time. So we're going to just come here. We're going to say that this right here is going to be on frame 16. That's going to be maybe 100. And so let's just kind of see where our threshold range is. So this right here is basically 0. All right, very close to it. And so our last threshold pixel ends, basically at 100. And then we're going to see, where does it actually begin? So say something like that. And then we want to make this linear. And so now, whenever we start this, let's make sure that we do let me just step through and kind of debug here. Oh yeah, so it looks like our thresholding doesn't start for quite a while. Am I doing something wrong? I don't know, I could be. Let me see. Threshold. Oh, it's because I haven't accumulated my frame. I messed it up. So this is a good thing to point out. So our accumulation doesn't end until frame 256. So let's do 257, and then we'll just start this. So now we have to wait. 257, and then we should be able to sheet encode. Wow, I'm really learning how difficult this is. Sheet encode our threshold. Let's see. Oh, I think zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. All right, sorry about this. I've kind of gone on a tangent here. 0. Oh, it's because then I need to move this. All right, here we go. This is a process that we could probably make easier. So let's set this to frame 257. We're going to set this to 257 plus 16. And voila, if all is correct, this should sheet encode properly. There you go. So instead of doing this, you can just kind of go in and do your threshold texture, and that's it. Moving on. All right. Goopy liquids. So one little trick that I have learned is, and let me save this project, and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say maybe my projects, liquid stuff. So one thing is I have this 3D stuff here. So I've got these little shapes, and as we've seen, you can use points, and we have a parameter that I've showed you as well called phase. And on the sphere, it just so happens that the phase kind of goes down. This is a perfectly looping operation. We can then copy spheres to those points. We can do a geo render to texture. And Mr. Cheeseknock said, will there be a recording? Yes, and it'll be at this exact link that you're watching this on. So we've got our geo render to texture. We're just using, in this case, like a diffuse because I wanted the lighting from kind of our viewport. And actually, you can set like where the lighting is. So we've got a diffuse of our actual geometry. And then here I've got a shrink operation. And so that's going to take it from kind of this 3D look to this weird little look. So if I take it here and we just change this, we can see what it does. It's going to shrink those pixels down. So let's go to like 3.5 where it was. I'm going to do a levels. You can then pixelize it, right? And then I'm going to shrink that. And now we're starting to have something that looks like a liquid. Then we can sharpen it. Now it's really starting to look like a liquid. Run it through some AO to kind of give me a little bit different colors. And then we transform it, because with transform, you can come in, you can say, hey, like, let me do like a non-uniform scale. Let me kind of squish this thing and so on. So then we do another levels. Then we can do something called flow stylization, which is a new node that we just added. And that's going to kind of give me like little highlights around the edges and kind of, give me slightly darker interiors and so on. And then, where it's really quite dark, it's going to kind of look, like it has some depth. It's going to be kind of back there. Then we could do a little color ramp. And so I've got this little blue color. And then over here, we've got another color ramp, which is just soft. I'm not doing any of the flow stylization. But then I can do a blend. And this says blend add, but it's actually min darken. And so I found out that by using these, differences in colors, you can kind of get some interesting sheens with particular modes. And I really quite liked the way that min darken looked. And then using the knowledge that we've had, except on a colored texture, that whenever you use a negative glow intensity, it kind of subtracts from the colors. And so we have that. And what that does is that's going to, give me a bit more bright color. And then once again, we come in and this time we max lighten it. And then we add a little bit of glow. And now we have this goopy thing, right? And so this is going to lead me into kind of another utility that I think you should definitely, absolutely, totally, for sure know about because it's very important. If there's an instance in which you want to compare a number of different outputs in the same graph, or you want to export like a static texture like this with different color variations or something, you can use a node called multipack, right? So if I come in here and I say shape, let's say shape, let's do star, let's do square, let's do, noise, whatever. We're going to just kind of set those up. And then we can say multipack. Let's do a 2x2 grid. Now we can view all those things out, or we can export this as a custom packed atlas. Very, very useful. This is insanely useful to be able to do, especially if you have like different variations of sprites or whatever it happens to be for your game. But in this case, I'm using it as this, and then eventually I do this. And so we do have text nodes in IlluGen as well. And so I made like a little miniature tutorial with different multipacks. So this is one multipack, this is a multipack, this is a multipack, this is a multipack, and then I plug it into one bigger multipack, right? So like you can do stuff like this to kind of create like little miniature tutorials, or if you need documentation and you're trying to teach your team how you did something and why you did it or whatever, you can just come in and you can see I have a bunch of like wireless things that I created. But in general, this is very cool. And this is a nice little example with some goop. So hopefully that's pretty cool and intuitive. Going back to the little stream thing, we're nearing the end here. We're going to be hopping into Unreal here shortly. So let's go ahead and start with an anomaly. So basically, if you look at this, you should be able to see this. This is my little project. We're going to create primarily just this little ball here, right? To kind of show you like a really simple mesh workflow and some simple texture workflows. And I'm not going to get into all the flying particles and stuff like that. That would be a much longer stream, and I'd probably bumble around trying to figure out how to do it again. But all this stuff right here was created in IlluGen, all these little cool things from inspired by Diablo 3. And this is my little world. And actually the textures for the ground, the textures for these rocks, the grass, all of this stuff was made with IlluGen. Like almost everything you see here, except like the geometry for this wall and the rocks is IlluGen. The grass geometry is IlluGen. And if I come here to my my PCG foliage and I actually regenerate it because it fails, we actually have some other cool vegetation as well that we have made with IlluGen. So the idea is that, IlluGen is morphing into more than just a visual effects tool. We want it to do environment art stuff as well. So hang on, it's compiling. And there we go. So like these cool little flower things, like this is all generated with IlluGen as well. And then we do, this big grass is IlluGen. So we're kind of building out like a little test world for us to, test IlluGen basically in a production environment and build cool stuff. But to keep this brief, let's try our best to replicate something like this, but we're going to make it maybe a bit more fancy, some different colors, maybe some different motion, and so on. So the first thing we're going to need to create is we're going to need to create the sphere mesh for this. Is it painted as foliage? No, we're using PCG scatter, if that's what you're talking about. So we have like different rule sets that tell it where to go from my understanding, but I'm not a PCG master. Our Shirk on our team is the PCG master. So going into IlluGen, the first thing is let's do a geo sweep. And the reason I'm doing this instead of say geo shapes is whenever we use this, and let's just choose sphere for this. This is, in general fine. Like this is a good sphere, but the way that this actually works is in our code, at least right now, I think we're going to make some changes to this due to a bug that I found. But basically, like this first half is then duplicated and flipped to the other half. So these quads are kind of like reversed. And if I come in and I do my geospace warp that I want to do, and let's just kind of, unclamp this, and we're going to twist this. And let's do, say, 180. You can see that the top edges here do not distort, but the bottom edges become like concave. And so right now, at least if you literally want to follow along with this, you have to use a geosweep sphere, because it then takes a whole plane and then basically sweeps it around. And that has the same topology on both sides. So we're going to take this space warp, we're going to plug it in. And you can see here that we have really nice edges. And I'm just going to do, say, 20 by 20. And this is our nice little sphere. And we're doing this twist because I kind of want some cool twisting motion. Now, you don't have to do a space warp. If you want, specific geometry like this, let's take this. We're going to say texture tiling is 1. I'm going to set my axis to secondary so that we have these particular UV coordinates. And so you could do something like, say, a geo-UV. And so if we come here, it's automatically going to F our UVs up. But we want to tell it, hey, inside of my projection, you can do stuff like, say, cylindrical or polar or, whatever. But we're going to say keep current. I just want to keep what I've already generated for my UVs. But what I want to do is I want to rotate my UVs, or actually, let's see. We've got keep current, and then you actually do your UV offset. So, but the thing is we're not able to twist, like I said, like you can like rotate your stuff or whatever, but it's not going to work. So we're going to use geomasking. So we're going to come here, we're going to say geomask. And so we want to use UV offset with a geomask. And we're going to come here, we're going to view our mask. And we're going to see that I just want something that's like this. It looks like curve kind of automatically maps to it. But I'm actually going to do, say, position based and position along the Z axis. And that's just going to say that, hey, the bottommost thing I know for sure, for a fact, like it's going to be dark and it's based on this curve, right? And so then I can control how my UV is going to twist based on this particular curve. But I like this how it is. And so I'm then going to go to GeoUV. I'm going to preview my UVs. And let's just do this. And we're going to say UV offset. And you'll notice that it's still spinning. That's because we need to actually select our mask. And so now that we have selected that, you can see that it's holding on to the UVs at the bottom. And it is going to twist these UVs for us. And so we can distort these UVs way, way more than we can distort the mesh. Now, one interesting thing is you can come in and then do, say, a space warp on top of it to kind of, further, I guess, put the geometry in the general area that the UVs are going. And that's what I'm personally going to do. I'm going to do something like this. And you can see that it does warp the UVs just a little bit further in a slightly different way. And it gives me a little bit more of like that pinched look that I'm looking for. And so we're going to have that geospace warp. But I'm going to come in and maybe let's just do like -1. And so, by the way, I do believe that here we've got, say, 0. If you go to like 0.2 or like 0.25, that's going to be 180 degrees. And then if you go to -0.5, that's a full 360-degree revolution. So we're going to keep it at that. And then we're going to go to export model. And then I'm going to select my little IG stream thing. And I'm going to say stream mesh sphere is what I'm calling it. I'm going to choose centimeters. And then I'm going to say export now. And so it has exported. We're going to go over to Unreal. And we're just going to come here. We're going to go to my content drawer. I'm going to go to my stream stuff here. I have some pre-made materials that I'll go over here in a second. But let's see. So we're going to go in here, not this. We're going to say import. I'm going to go to my stuff, and this is my stream mesh sphere. One thing to make sure of, like this is super duper important, is you want to make sure that any mesh that you generate with IlluGen, you want to make sure that build nanite is not on. If you use nanite, it is going to mess your shit up. And then you're going to ask us, why is it broken? It's nanite. Nanite is the problem. You do not want it. Make sure it's unchecked. So now that we know that it is not checked, we're going to say import. And it's going to say that there's some issues, maybe with like smoothing groups or some shit. We don't care about that. All right. So we've got our little sphere here. And let's come in and we're going to say maybe like 2 by 2 by 2 for our scale. And let's go over here. Something like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw on my little refraction texture. And I'm going to show you how you can create this refraction texture right here. Let's say refract stream. Voila. So I actually do not want emissive color. That's something that I was trying to do earlier. So the gist behind refraction, and we're going to make this little texture here in just a second too. So the gist is that if we want refraction, we've got this little thing here. So we've got a lerp, and we can just do this. And I'm going to bring that to the other screen real quick, and then I'm just going to save it, and we're going to see how this is going to update. And so we've got this, and the actual distortion and waves is driven by a texture. So before I dive into the material, let's go ahead and create that texture in IlluGen, and then we will talk about the material. So let's see, IlluGen, where are you? Okay, so from here, if we want to create something like that, let's go and create maybe a noise. And we're going to use, say, a UV noise as well. And we're going to use quite a bit of rotational folding in this. So like, let's give us like a lot of, cool little like lines and stuff like that. I want to kind of get, some interesting detail in this. Maybe let's make it a little bit larger. And then we're going to use this, and you can see that it does indeed tile. So we're going to use this. And let me just, kind of mess around with some of these things. Maybe something like that. And then maybe a little bit of a blur, potentially. And we're going to say normal create. And let's increase my intensity. And we can just see that. So this is really quite, intense. You can do something like this. But I do know for a fact that I want to blur it. And we're going to do something like that. And we can do things like, say, anisotropy and give us like a bit more like vertical waves here. I think that's pretty cool. We could also do it with something like that. And so this right here is so far, I think, a fairly interesting texture. There may be a bit too much noise in this. So maybe we do something, a bit more blur or whatever. But I think that this is probably fine. So what we can do is let's go ahead and export normal. With Unreal, at least for refraction, you can choose to invert Y or not. I am not going to invert the Y, but I am going to select my destination, and we're just going to say anomaly, normal, texture, or whatever. We're going to export it. We're going to go into Unreal, and we're going to import it. Anomaly, normal, texture. And now whenever I go to my refraction, and I bring this over, we're going to, and let me go ahead and break my world offset as well. So we're going to use, say, anomaly texture, like so. Let's go ahead and save this. And so with our simple, let me just bring this out of the way and explain it. So basically we're saying, hey, the minimum possible refraction value for our material is going to be 1.1. The maximum possible refraction for our material is going to be 1.5. And then I'm plugging in a Fresnel because I want it to be basically like 1.1 kind of in the center and then more distortion on the edges. So if we preview this, we can see that wherever this is the alpha channel between these two. It's going to lerp between these two values. And so we can see here that this is what it looks like. But because it's more than one, like you can't particularly see it. And if anybody knows how you can actually preview values over one, let me know. But in general, we've got this Fresnel. And so this is basically what our gradient is going to be. Then we're plugging that into refraction. Now, if you do want refraction, you do have to come over into your material. You have to say that there's a method called index of refraction. I'm just using surface, translucent, and unlit as my shading model. And then here I've got my texture coordinate. It's just of 1. We've got a panner that's just kind of going upwards. And so we can see our little texture here. And live update. Well, I don't know why it's not updating live. There we go. Oh yeah, TSAA. Let's see, pixel animation. Well, you can't even do that. Thanks, Unreal. Well, opaque. Okay. Yeah, I guess it only works on opaque materials. But anyway, it does have pixel animation. And so this normal, so if I break this link and I save it and we go and look at our ball, we can see that there is indeed some distortion, right? But that normal is basically going to help redirect the light for the index of refraction. So we're going to come in here, we're going to go to our refract, and we're going to plug in our little texture sample into normal. And then one interesting thing is, let's go ahead and save this. And so now we've got this cool little distortion. And I think that, we just have too much distortion. And so, it's not quite as wavy and simple like the one over there on the right. Now, there's two things we can do. We can either edit the waves inside of IlluGen and kind of change the scaling of the noise, or we can go into here and we can change our actual texture's scale. So if we come here and we bring in, say, our little texture coordinate, we could do, say, like 0.25 and 0.25. And now we've got that. But the problem with it is it's not going to tile. And so what we can do is I think we're just going to have to edit it in IlluGen. So we're going to go over to IlluGen and we're going to edit this. And we're going to kind of change our scale a little bit. Let's make it quite a bit larger. We're going to change our scale here, make it quite a bit larger. And so now we've got a much larger scale looking texture. We're going to go ahead and just export, overwrite, go back to Unreal, and we are going to re-import this texture. Re-import. There we go. Now we have some pretty cool looking waves. I think that that's quite neat. And let's make sure that our refraction texture coordinate is 1 and 1. It is. And you could also do something like, say, 2 and 2 to kind of give you a bit of a slower pan and a different shape. I think that that is pretty interesting. So we're going to leave it at that. Now, one thing to notice, and I don't know if you can see it on stream, but as you get farther away, and maybe I'll introduce this next part over here, which does a certain fade length by camera. So let's go ahead and create our next part of the textures. So what I want to do is I want to actually create the kind of scrolling noise that's inside on the sphere. And let me just look at my chat just in case. Well, the normal isn't seamless if you have something that's not tiling by default at the scale that your normals are, right? So like 0.5 isn't going to tile necessarily to my knowledge if it's on a mesh and you're requiring it to tile. So we've got this, and this is quite nice, but let's go ahead and create our little sphere. So we can just take this, we're going to duplicate it. We're going to say like 1.9, 1.9, 1.9. We're going to make it smaller and on the inside. And we're going to choose anomaly center, which I have in the center. And it's really bright white right this second because it requires a particle color. And let's kind of go over this texture and what it does. And I'm just going to go here and let's replace our particle color with something like, 1.50. So we've got this, and I don't know why, once again, my stuff just isn't live. I give up. Unreal, man. So clunky. So anyway, so we've got this little texture, and what it does is we have a texture sample, and we're going to go in and we're going to create a texture similar to this, but we're going to kind of make our own. So in our red channel, we have something like this. In our green channel, we have something like that. And then in blue, this is just random. It doesn't apply to this. So we've got, this kind of packed texture. And what we're doing is we're saying, hey, I'm going to use a texture coordinate. We're going to pan it. And then we're going to append the red channel of the vector to the red channel of this. So we're using this texture as the green channel. And that's giving us kind of a texture coordinate. Then we're going to plug that into a panner. And what it gives us is this like heavily distorted noise. Without it, if we say break this link, this is what we have. We have just our noise as it is. But if we want to add some extra motion as we're panning the noise, you can use, say, this append and this texture to kind of create a fake, weird, crazy, distorted look. And you can also do stuff like, I believe you can like add in or like change, the strength of this and so on. But for me, I just did it, as it is. And you can see I've done another one over here with maybe probably a different scale or something. So we've got a different thing. We got different speeds and so on. And we've got these two different texture samples. Now, they're running at two different speeds. And I don't know. Yeah, so on this one, this is 2 and 1, and then this one right here is just 1 by 1. So we've got these two different textures, basically. And then whenever you add them together, you get something like this. And apologies for TAA. I wish I knew how to disable it in the viewport because it sucks. Let's see, has pixel animation. I have it checked. But anyway, so we've got this animated texture. Then we multiply it by 2 to kind of bring it back up to our values. Then I've got my little color. So we're going to color it. And then I've got a Fresnel here to kind of kill the inside of the center, right? And so basically I just want to make sure that like the center is quite dark. And then I've got another Fresnel over here, and this is for my emissive or my base color. And so I'm saying, hey, I want the center to be dark, but I want there to be bright edges. And then I'm going to multiply those two Fresnels together. And so now I've got a bit more of a bright edge and a darker center here. And then finally, I'm using eye adaptation inverse, which basically says like no matter what your eye adaptation values are inside of Unreal, like I'm going to guarantee that it's always 3000 intensity. And it's just going to ignore whatever the eye adaptation values are. And you can either take this and just, multiply 3000 times this, and then multiply it, with eye adaptation or plug something into the light input. I've tried it both ways. It doesn't particularly matter. We're going to plug that into emissive. And that's really all our texture is. So let's go in and let's go ahead and replace some of these textures, and then we'll throw the material on our shape. So we're going to go into IlluGen. And so we've created a cool normal. And let's go ahead to noise. And let's do something interesting, maybe with Voronoi or something. So we're going to do, say, Voronoi noise. Let's choose, say, F1, which is going to give us this like interesting, like patchy lightning look. And we can like kind of scale the octaves a little bit if we want to. We can go through and we're going to use maybe, say, our preview matrix to go between, say, noise octaves and maybe our Voronoi result. So there's one of the textures that we kind of saw that's kind of interesting. Maybe we choose something like this, like it's got like some puffy clouds or something. I think that could be cool for one of our textures. So that's what we'll do. So it turns out that we're using Billow, F1, and Voronoi. And we can kind of change our octaves or whatever, but I'm going to keep it pretty noisy. And we're going to say multi-mask. We're going to export it just as is. Then I'm going to bring in another noise texture. And let's just select, say, Voronoi edges as that. And then let's bring in another one. And let's try maybe simplex noise, but with, some level of like anisotropy. And so we're going to try out these different textures and just kind of see how they look. So we're going to go here to our project directory, select folder, and we'll say stream anomaly textures. I'm just going to export that. We're going to say it's sRGB. Now, one thing I don't know for sure, and maybe I'll figure out afterwards, is whether or not you have sRGB if you have individual grayscale textures. I think that you probably still do want sRGB as far as I understand. So you probably do want to check that box. So from here, we're going to go into Unreal once again, and we're going to go to our content drawer, and we're going to import it and stream anomaly textures. And we're going to go to my anomaly center, and let's make sure that I select that texture. And then as I go here, where are my, there we go. So we're going to just swap these out, and we're going to test the red channel first and see how it looks. And so let's go ahead and take this, and we're going to put this inside. So we've changed all the textures. We're just going to test red and red and so on. And then we're going to save this. We're going to go here. We've got our center texture, and let's change our glow. Maybe let's do like 500 so that we can actually see this. So I think that, you'll notice that as we disappear, we've got a problem with our refraction, right? So one, like our refraction in the center isn't, letting us see the sphere very much. And then as we disappear, like the internal sphere, it shrinks a lot. And so one thing that I found out to prevent that is if we go back to our refraction texture, we have this little function that I've made. And if we plug that into IOR, it's basically saying if the camera is farther than 1500 units, Unreal units away, we're going to use this refraction value, 1.03. And then, the camera is basically our alpha to lerp either between this or this. So now if we save this and we plug this in and we go far away, now it looks nice here. And then as we get to about there, it switches over to that camera distance function, and it keeps our sphere at a particular size because we don't want it to just shrink and shrink and shrink forever and ever and ever. So I think that's pretty cool. So let's kind of go in and edit our maybe our refraction values. So maybe our maximum is going to be like maybe 1.25 or something. So that's going to let us see a little bit more. And then, maybe we can change our Fresnel. So maybe let's try like a 3. And I wonder if I can actually have this kind of float. And so we can see I've got values here. So we can say like 6. We can say 2, 1, 3. Just kind of play around with it. And we can do like 1.1. See how it looks all the same. We can do like 1.5. And I think that maybe our texture inside of IlluGen is a bit too strong since our values here are still like pretty intense. So you can see it's kind of an iterative process. So we're going to go back here. We're going to choose normal create. And we're just going to bring this really quite a lot down. Let's say like 230 something. Overwrite. We're going to go here, re-import. And there we go. Now we've got something that's a lot simpler. And one thing that you'll see is you will see a kind of like an edge here. This is a bug that we found. It should be hot fixed either today or tomorrow whenever our IlluGen patch comes out. But we're going to be hot fixing this because I found it yesterday when trying to test this stuff out. So I think this is actually starting to look pretty cool. And so we can go back, have this be what it is. I think this is cool. We've got some cool edge distortion. We could even do something like say 2 or 3 or whatever. But I think this is quite cool. Let's do 1.5 again. So we've got cool edge distortion. If we hide the thing here, so if we hide it, we can see that this right here is what our current material is looking like. And so let's go through and we're going to see what a different channel looks like. So that's what our red channel looks like, which if we go to IlluGen is our like Voronoi cloudy noise. I think that's pretty cool. And so let's try our green channels. And so one thing you can also do is say, you know, do your distortion with one of the channels. So say you're green, and now you can see that we're getting like a much different result. So let's look at it in the viewport. And so now we've got kind of like some more interesting hard shapes inside of the distortion, but the actual textures that are going through are still like our Voronoi noise. So we've got an interesting little effect going on here, I think. But let's just do all Voronoi. So we're going to do green and see how it looks. And like there's a trillion variables here. You can change the scales of these. You can change the intensities. You can do, more layers of animation. Okay, I'm thinking that's pretty cool, but just for posterity, let's test the blue channel texture. So blue channel, something like this. This was our anisotropic noise. And so now it's like a really smooth, like wind effect or something like that. It's kind of interesting. Remember that like we've really, really bent our UVs as well. So there's quite a lot happening here. And then we also are changing and stretching here as well. So maybe let's do like 4 or something because it was anisotropic. So, I mean, this is quite interesting, but I think that maybe our most visually interesting noise out of all of them was probably the green. So that's what we're going to go with. So we're going to go with all greens. This is our Voronoi noise. And let's just see, what does this look like with like maybe 3? I'm curious. I mean, that's pretty cool. So let's say that we like that. Very interesting. Let's go ahead and re-enable this. I think that that is quite cool. It's not as wavy and, distorted as this one. If we look at, say, our texture here, so if I go to materials, or sorry, textures, and we look at our original normal map, we have something like this. I think if we compare it to that, so let's see, we are on Stream VFX. So this one is a bit more intense, but maybe it had a bit more blur or something. And so, there's a number of things that you can do, and maybe let's just do one more iteration. And like you can see, like I think my point that I'm trying to show is that there's just a number of different iterative things that you want to do. We can kind of change our anisotropy, change our scale, maybe change our intensities, maybe do some like differing like rotation or something. So change the location of some of the dots and stuff. You can also do like say angle and length or derivative based, stuff here. We can change the, amount of octaves that we have. We can choose a different noise type for our actual distortion. So maybe something like that. We can kind of change our rotational folding. Like there's just so many different parameters. And so maybe we want something that's more like this. And so it's just like large rolling distortion. We can export that and we'll go back to Unreal and we will re-import. And now those are moderately similar. And let's see how it looks here. Okay, so that's a lot more slow rolling distortion. I think that that's pretty cool. So finally, how do you actually say spawn this in a particle system, and what are some of the things that we can do with this? So if we go here, let's go to a Niagara system. I'm just going to say completely empty, and we'll just leave it named as that. In my renderer, I'm going to add a mesh component. We're going to go to meshes. We're going to choose sphere, stream mesh sphere. And from here, let's go ahead and say, on our emitter update, we're going to do a spawn burst instantaneous. It's saying that we need to add an emitter state. So I'm just going to say self. I'm going to say once, and then it is an infinite loop. And then with our particle spawn, let's say that we can have maybe, let's change our mesh renderer here, and I'm going to choose, say, initial mesh or initialize particle. Then we're going to set our mesh scale. Let's just say uniform, and it's just going to be 2 because that's what our size was in the world, or maybe 2.5. And so this right here is going to be our, let's say, refraction. Okay. And inside of our mesh, we can say enable material overrides. We're going to choose an override element, and that element is going to be our, what did I call it? Let's see, I called it stream refract. Stream refract. And so there we go. Now we've got our refraction. Quite cool. And that's just as it is. And you can do things like, say, rotate this thing over time if you want to, with like a particle update. So you could say, update the mesh orientation or whatever. But I'm just going to leave it static for simplicity. We're going to choose this. We're going to say with the initialized particle, let's do like 2.4 as our size. And then from here, what we can do is we want to make sure that we change our texture to be the center. And we called it anomaly center, unless anomaly center. There we go. So there's our thing. And inside of my anomaly center, I'm going to make sure that I hook back up my particle color. So I want to make sure that I'm not controlling it through this. I want to choose my own particles color. We're going to go ahead and utilize it that way. So in our world, it is now this color. And so let's go ahead and bring in our Niagara system. And then you can hit / on your keyboard to restart all your particle systems. And so now we've got this. So now, whenever I go to, say, this, we're going to just pop this off. And for the sake of the stream, and if I go to, say, initialize particle, and I choose my color, I should be able to, and actually that's my refraction particle, so it doesn't matter. So we're going to go here to initialize particle. And now we can start doing cool stuff. So we can choose like, hey, do I want, a deeper color? Do I want something like this? So on and so forth. Maybe we do like a weird pinkish color. And now I think, from this, I really want a lot more glow. So we can go into our anomaly center. We're going to say 3,000 again, maybe 5,000. Let's say 5,000. Let's save that. And now we've got something like this. So this is really quite interesting and cool. We've got some cool distortion, and I think that's pretty cool. But one thing that my original anomaly had was we had some WPO offset. So if I go to my refraction texture, or rather my refraction material, you'll notice that I did disconnect WPO, and we can come here and we're going to utilize our same stream noise. So stream anomaly textures. And I think that probably the red channel, which is just our Voronoi, is probably best. And so we're going to do this. We're going to plug it into our world position offset. And so you can just see I'm multiplying it, by our vertex normal. Just going to make sure that it kind of goes outwards. And yeah, multiply, and then a strength parameter in the 20. And we can save that. And let's stop previewing that. And now you can see that we've got this little wobbly orb. And so now it is wobbling. Quite cool. And from here, but you can see, one of the issues that we have with some of our stuff. Now in IlluGen, you can fuse points. And so let's see if fusing our points will fix that. But I think this is part of a bug that we're going to fix tomorrow. So I've got this. We can say geo fuse points. That should theoretically freeze those together. Now, here's one thing that you should know before you re-import into Unreal in a situation like this. For whatever reason, if if you have Niagara open and you have any of these spheres and stuff showing, it is going to crash Unreal whenever it re-imports. I don't think it's an IlluGen thing. I think that it is a Unreal thing. And so we're going to re-import that mesh with our fused vertices. We will see if that fixes my WPO. But now we can Control Z. And so it does not. So this is something that we need to look into. Like I said, I think that there's a bug here. But theoretically, that edge should not be there. But anyway, if we go to this side, it does look nice. So we've got this cool floating orbular thing, and it's only using like 2 different textures, some scrolling noise, and 1 mesh. And the final thing I want to show is if we do come here and let's just say disable our Niagara system, or rather this one, and we go to IlluGen, like one last parameter to kind of play around with is our actual like twisting amount. So if we go to our space warp and maybe we come here and we say our geo UV, let's do like negative 0.15 or something, and so that we don't have as much of a twirl, we can go ahead and export that, overwrite, go to Unreal, make sure that our meshes are not showing or you will crash, because Unreal does that constantly. Now we can show our new system. And so you can see that we have a bit less circular motion now, and we have a lot more distortion right in the camera because we changed the way that the UVs were working. And so, from here, it's kind of like a back and forth of like, hey, do I like how much distortion I have, with my refraction? So like I can come here and, once again, change like my final refraction. So we can do like 1.25 or something and see how that looks. A little bit less. I think that's pretty cool. And that's just about it. Are there any questions before we get off? I'm right on 2 hours, but I am curious how things are going there on the stream. How many viewers do we have? 48 right now. Marvelous. Any questions? Let's see. I'll show my face. I am alive. All right. Anybody have questions about IlluGen? Let's see. Very cool stream. Thanks a lot. You are very welcome. I'm glad that this has been helpful, hopefully. So Zep says, I sometimes have that issue with the mesh distortion too, also with custom made. Oh yeah, that's right. So one way to get around this is if you have WPO, you can do like the noise inside of IlluGen, bake it as a VAT, and then have the animation be pre-made basically. And so that is actually that. So it's not a bug with our fuse points, it's just WPO. So yeah, the workaround that I learned from Stalker 2 from looking at their projects is they actually use VATs to animate their anomalies like this and prevent the seam from tearing. So yeah, good point. Let's see. Will there be an elemental week this year? I think that there will be some like semblance of an elemental week, but it'll probably just be in the form of like a singular stream where I just tell the news and stuff like that about our products and so on. But I don't think that there's going to be any direct training and stuff like that like for the rest of the week. Barth says, I am a beginner in VFX. Do you have any resources on how to use simple masks that I've made in Photoshop to have some effects on the edge, like smoke or fire? I'm not sure what you mean, but I mean, if you have a certain mask that you like, you can import that into IlluGen and then like use a blend node to try and get it to work, if that's what you're saying. Mr. Cheese Knock says there is an icon inside the engine on the top bar. Is is that a plugin? Yes, this is our bridge. We're building a bridge, so that whole back and forth of like re-import, do this, re-import, do that. We have it so that if you hit connect on our little bridge, which I can't show it because I don't have a build offhand internally that works with it, but there somewhere on my hard drive is a build. Basically, you hit connect, you tell IlluGen that you want to live sync whatever it is that you're doing with an export node, and as soon as you change a parameter, bam, it's updated live in Unreal, in your materials, in Niagara, etc. And so you can be authoring your textures on this screen and you're live looking at the changes here. So there's not that whole switch tabs, whatever, that I was doing, that whole charade. So like it is going to be way, way, way faster here in the future. And hopefully within, I don't know, maybe 3 to 4 months or so, we'll have the bridge out, at least for IlluGen. Yes, it works with meshes too. So it's quite cool. Oh, and I was showing the actual bridge thing. Let me swap here. Ta-da! So yeah, so when you click it, you press connect, and it'll connect to IlluGen, and it automatically syncs live with IlluGen. Diego says, I ended up missing a good chunk of the stream, so apologies if this was covered. Do you support UDIMs for imported models? And how does that play out in the graph? Can I generate things per tile? We do not support UDIMs to my knowledge. I don't even know what a UDIM is. I wonder if that's like terrain stuff. But yeah, we don't support that to my knowledge. But if you have a use case for it, and you want to argue for the feature to be made, just join our Discord and tell us why you think it would be useful, and we can look into it. Will a bridge be available for Unity 2? Eventually, but that is like the last bridge that we're going to build, just because Unity is such a pain in and of itself, in my opinion. I don't even know how to use Unity, so it's one of those things where it's going to take a while. I think like immediately our first bridge that's going to roll out is going to be to Unreal. Then next is going to be to Blender, and then Godot, and then Unity finally. And so hopefully this was a useful stream for everybody. I kind of, went really high level on just yeah, I mean, Unity is a completely different level of pain for me, even though Unreal is a pain. All the engines are a pain, but I couldn't even figure out how to make a particle in Unity. I watched tutorials, and the way that things just stack and the way the outliner works and stuff, it's not for my brain. But and actually, Diogo, one thing I can say is one thing you can do is if I show IlluGen, maybe this is what you're talking about. So you can see that if we go to GeoUV, you can have channels, right? And so you can say, like, you can have up to 4 different UVs. So you have from 0 to 3. So maybe this is UV. So like here, like, we can say, hey, I want it to be twisted, one way, and then in another UV, I want it to be twisted another way. So maybe that's something that you're talking about. So maybe we do have it, but we just call it channels. But let me know if that is what you're thinking. So Eticool says, I've noticed that a lot of presets are built using the cycles modulator any ways we could get a simpler time modulator that would simply be frame times speed. Is there a simpler way that I'm missing? There is a simpler way that you are missing. Allow me to demonstrate. Let's say that we have a shape and we have a cycle node. And let's just say that I want this to grow from 0 to 100, within some certain range. So we're going to expose this. And now we've got this little thing, and this is our animation. But like, let's say that I want this animation to take exactly 16 frames. So you come here, frequency time unit, frames, 16. There you go. There's my 16 frame animation of this thing. Or it can be 64 frames, right? And so this is how you can decide like an exact frame amount, or you can say, I want it to be seconds. I want this to be exactly 1 second. And then it'll do that. Or you can say, I want it to be 5 seconds. And then, you can say, I want it to be 2 times 3 seconds, which is 6. But anyway, like you can do math in here too. So hopefully that helps you figure that out. And you can also modulate your modulation, as far as I know. So like you can come here and do another cycle. Now that's crazy, but you can do whatever you want. Any further questions before we hop off here? IlluGen is really cool. I mean, there's just so much stuff that you can do. And if you like doing substance designer type stuff, we can do full materials. But one of the differences here is that this is actually a full mesh with like a trillion little triangles or quads. So really cool. We just improved our meshing algorithm so that it's quite intense. So really quite awesome. What was the button that you used to show the textures mix? So if you go to this, you can right click, you can say open preview matrix, right? That's one way. You can do Control Shift M to bring it open, or you can go to view preview matrix. Let's see. So you've got like different blend modes that you can preview and all kinds of cool stuff. Let's see. Your question is because of substance. You're trying to see if you can replace it. Yeah, let us know. Feels like Substance Designer plus Houdini for VFX without the simulation. Am I wrong? You're kind of wrong in a sense that LiquidGen and say AmberGen are two key simulation components, and then you can bring that information into IlluGen, kind of like I did here in our stream intro. So like if you come here, like this right here is an AmberGen simulation, and then I can come in and author it, or you can import a sequence and then make it a flip book or whatever you want. So like that's pretty cool. But for in terms of like more simulations, we have like full particle sims coming here in the future. So like if I go, let me just look at my downloads folder real quick. So like this thing, this is all IlluGen. So we have particle simulations that are coming. The particles can collide. You can do stuff like this as well, and then bake out this information and plug it into Niagara and things like that. So there's quite a lot of cool stuff that's coming. You can even do like 3D particle collisions so that they can kind of stack on top of each other and stuff like that. Or say if you need to pack shapes in such a way that they don't overlap, or you want to do something like my liquid goop that I did, but you want particles that have a life and whatever, and you want an animated, like hand-drawn looking splat or something like that, you can use particles plus our stylization. Yeah, this is inside of IlluGen. This is what's coming in the next major update. Full particle systems, lots of control, event managers, and just all kinds of stuff. And being able to do this, and let me see if I have anything else on my hard drive. I don't know if I do or not. But either way, there's a lot of stuff that's coming. So, especially with particles, I mean, there's just so much stuff that you can do, like foam textures where you need like little circles, to not overlap. So, for instance, if I come here and I say, regular tiles, and then like these, they're not touching, but they're very regular. And then if I come in and I start to do, say, like position randomization, well, now this isn't good for like a foam texture because they're actually overlapping and bubbles aren't going to overlap. So particles will actually be able to simulate something just like this with our 2D particle editor. And then you can use 2D particles or 3D particles in your 2D graph or in your 3D graph and vice versa, and control just a bunch of really complicated stuff, and generate really complex textures like non-overlapping stuff. Or say you have a bunch of rocks and you want to simulate them falling and colliding and turning into a pile and none of them intersect, and then you can do a geo render to texture, render that to your texture, and then utilize that. And so on. So there's just a lot of really cool stuff that's going to be coming to IlluGen. Stefan says, thank you, Jenga FX. You're welcome for the informative session. When is your next live show before IBC? Do you mean like our next live stream? I'm not sure when our next live stream is going to be. It's going to be whenever IlluGen 2 is ready to show publicly. Whenever that is, probably in a couple months, I would think. Is my hope. But, at least enough to show like, hey, look at what we're working on. This is our progress, so on. Because we have a lot of people working on IlluGen 2 right now. And ideally, within the next couple of months, we can do a stream. And I'll also show LiquidGen because we have like new colors, like color mixing, dynamic viscosity stuff. So like viscosity over life and a whole host of other stuff. And yet we'll also be at SIGGRAPH as well. So if anybody's going to SIGGRAPH and you want to meet me and Jason, feel free to come to SIGGRAPH. We'll be there at the Dell booth as usual. Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, I barely scratched the surface today on IlluGen. I mean, there's just so much stuff that you can do with this tool, and hopefully, just showing you like a little bit of whatever. Like, this is something that we're working on for one of our films, but like being able to just do massive textures like this and have it all be generated in IlluGen in one graph and stuff is really quite crazy, I think. So, I mean, IlluGen is just stupid powerful. It's just, how are you going to use it, And when we have our bridge, it's going to be even easier to use, in your engines and stuff. So I'm really psyched for IlluGen. It's personally the tool that I'm most excited about right this second. There's just a lot of stuff that we're able to do, and I mean, like a lot of this stuff is just things that I would not have been able to do, in other tools because I'm just not used to using them and I just don't like using them and so on. And so there's just a lot of stuff that we're able to do with IlluGen, and it's really cool. And hopefully the little anomaly demo that I did with Unreal today, even though it's just like a little sliver, but it shows that it's like really easy to actually get stuff in Engine. And if we I can show one more thing. If I go here and I go to, I believe VFX Arena. No, it's this one. This is our little vertical slice game that we're working on to kind of show off the power of IlluGen. And so this whole effect right here was made with IlluGen. So, all the lightning strikes and the random stuff on the ground, the ground cracks, etc. All of this is, we've got all this grass, like I said, the snow particles, etc. All of this is IlluGen. The little orbs. So really quite cool. I mean, IlluGen is super powerful. Let's see. WDK says, will Emergen 2 replace the V1 version? They will both be existing. If you still want to use V1, which you will if you have projects that you want to save, then there's that. But Emergen 2.0 is a completely different tool in every way. Projects will not carry over. It is rewritten from scratch, like everything. Every single thing about it is different. And I can show like a little tiny sneaky peeky, potentially. There you go. Yeah, Emergen, so fast. Stupid fast, actually. And we're starting to get node previews and stuff like that. So there's a lot of cool stuff coming. Let's see, Super Explosion 6. We're still working on our shading and things like that. It's not quite ready, but there's going to be some really cool stuff coming to Emergen. This is a bug. This is part of like why it's not released yet, because it's not supposed to do that. But we do have like full sparse simulations and so on. So, I mean, immaculate quality and so on. I mean, this is really quite awesome. We've got some stuff where we're going to fix like the top edges, but we're still working on the rendering and stuff right now. It is digressed backwards a little bit while we re-implement some features and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff that's coming, but we'll show you more when the time comes. But Emergen 2 is going to be sick. We're working very hard on it. We have like 10 people on the team on it right now, programming for it. So the vast majority of the team is on Emergen 2 right now. And then we're working hard on IlluGen as usual. That's getting a super duper major update here soon. All right, let's see. Last questions, T-minus like 1 minute. All right. I cannot wait for that. I hope that there will be some way to contain the sims if there's no domain. We will have ways to kind of clean up the simulation over time and stuff for sure. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. I appreciate it. Hopefully this tutorial was helpful. Hopefully this felt like a bit of a masterclass. I covered a lot of information, kind of gave you a little insight of how to use it in Unreal, because there's always questions about that. And I wanted something on our YouTube to be able to point to people to say, hey, here's how you use this in Unreal. And just to show you that, like, the stuff that you're generating in IlluGen, it doesn't particularly look like anything crazy. But then once you start using your materials and your shaders and you put it on meshes and stuff like that, it turns into something that's completely different and cool and crazy. And the point of IlluGen is to generate all of that stuff, which is just weird and odd and whatever. And then you utilize all that in Engine to build really cool, crazy effects. So quite a few studios are using it now. We have professionals picking it up. It is a production tested tool. It is used in production in actual games right now. So, now's the time to learn it. So it's pretty cool. Well, thank you very much for your time, and we will catch y'all later. Bye-bye.